Hello and welcome to Re-Uncovery Stage C, Harvest, Share. Now this is going to be an exploration, and it's taken me a while to get to this point where I'm trying to figure out what to do next, and now that I'm coming out of depression, the ability to do so, and just looking and taking stock at everything that I've written, or a good portion of it, to see where to go next. And luckily, I also, when I was in mania or having energy a few months ago, I was writing down, like, what should I do next? So that way, now that I'm looking at this and being like, okay, this is what I want to do next. I just looked at some of my instructions for what to do next that I wrote before I lost track of everything, and it's the same. So that to me is a good sign that I'm on the right track for what it is that I wish to be doing exactly. And I already created a worksheet for Re-Uncovery Stage A and B. And now that I feel like I'm in Stage C myself, and I haven't outlined like any kind of process or sort of activities, if you will, to go around it. The first activity for me being in Stage C and trying to unfold Stage C as I see it from my perspective and my experience, and wishing to create something that makes things easier for other people in certain ways. And lots of people have different things available. This is just one possible tool. So now that I feel like I'm sort of in Stage C, what does that look like? Like, what processes can I create for that myself? And so I have a ton of different writings and lots of context. And how will that context inform a framework for other people to unfold and create their own content with context, with their context, with their experience, with their life. So although mine is of a certain kind, doesn't mean that other people are interested in the same thing, but a process when at this stage could be helpful. So I think it'll be helpful for me to process the information that, I don't think this other mic is working. That's okay. So I think it'll be helpful just to sort of process it. And there's a lot of different layers to this, and also layers to talking out why I'm going through these layers. So there's layers upon layers and within layers. And I think part of it is creating a process for myself to be able to create Stage C process, and also to process some of the information that's part of my Stage C. So it's kind of strange. It's like, I feel there's a structure for Stage C that can be helpful, and it's not a rigid structure. And that's why I don't really need the structure in order to do it myself. And then because the structure is kind of intuitive, I'll be intuiting it as I do my Stage C. So I don't know what that's going to look like, but we're going to find out. So let's go into it. Now, this is what I found in one of my notes about Stage C when I was in my last phase of energy. Originally, I had chapter 7 of Stage C, which just is the first chapter of Stage C, just called it a chapter. The original way I had it written out was leverage points, complexity, questions, and dialogue, possibly with others, because self-dialogue was a part of Stage A and B for me. It's not the only way to unfold things, but actually self-dialogue sort of created Re-Uncovery. And so it might not be something that is needed per se, but it can happen again in later stages. It's a tool that can always be used. But since I did dialogue with myself at Stage C, chapter 7, I'm wondering, well, will I start having dialogue with others? And I did already have a few dialogues with other people. I was on a podcast, so that would include a dialogue with others. So I was already leaning into Stage C, Chapter 7, having something to dialogue about others with. And, that can even be something as an activity of writing out one story, so it doesn't have to be re-uncovery per se. But in this structure, after some projects and thinking about and creating a lot of stuff, then I have something to talk about. And somebody found out about my book, and then that's why they wanted to have a chat. So these things lead to different opportunities or things coming up. And then it's amazing to have a conversation with somebody who gets it and is like-minded or resonated with something that you created. So I added in a bunch of different things to chapter 7 because, like I said, it's not really created yet. And Stage C has chapter 7, 8, and 9. So I'm just looking at chapter 7 right now. And also, here I am, and I've been talking about looking at the different books that I've compiled a bunch of different bits of information together on that topic, but I haven't had the time to write books on it yet. And then with the advent of ChatGPT and other AI, wondering if that is the way to go about utilizing this information. And the books usually, the topics are not perfect, and it's all a mess, and it's just research, a lot of my own insights, and then also different things people have said who do research or have some kind of authority on whatever topic it is. And I wanted to sort of integrate that, right? But let's see where it could possibly go now. So basically, chapter 7 or stage C is like when I feel it starts to become quantum consciousness. So it's sort of like uncovering some of these quantum insights that came out of nowhere. Now, we're not going to go too much into each of these things, but part of stage C is also talking about roles that you might want to create to play in the world in a way. And we'll get more into that as well. Here's leverage again, which was in there, leverage points. So leverage with AI, with gestures. And then I was realizing that it's also another instance of harvesting, or I should say the harvest template. So in stage A of Re-Uncovery, there's a harvest template, which is different topics to realize that there's different types of information coming through when it's this other way of knowing, or more information coming through one's mind and consciousness than one is used to, which usually indicates that it's some other type of information that isn't of our knowledge and memory that we typically experience. So like experiencing new information. And so now that I have my harvest template, now I'm trying to figure out what it is I want to do next. So even within chapter 7, it's like, what are the projects? What are the categories of information? But this time I'm actually looking in my own writing and research. And one of the reasons for that is that I don't want to take in too much more information. So each time I read something that I wrote before, there's not as much information there because I've already read it. And I read it, or I had a sense of it when I wrote it. So at the same time, it's also a seed of how that information wants to be filled in and expanded upon. And that's something that I learned about when I was looking at this yesterday or the day before, because I realized that even if I just plug in the bits of information I wrote down and want to engage with it through AI, it's likely not enough, because a lot of them imply the next couple sentences that I can look at that insight or that bit of information, like a sentence or two, whatever it is, and know what comes before and what comes after. And that's sort of how I wrote the book, is sorting all those different bits and then expanding upon them and then connecting them. But, maybe AI can do that. We will see. And then at the same time, I feel like talking about that stuff rather than typing about it and getting all the bits perfectly. So looking at insights and expanding, like what did I mean, or what was the meaning behind this? And it's interesting because whenever I would write them down, I never had to expand upon them, because in a way I knew the rest of it. I was just writing down the hint to be able to prompt myself rather than talk about it with the original prompt that came in. Now, there could be scenarios in which no writing needs to happen besides ignoring it, and then just speaking it out in real time, which could be something that happens if one day part of society at least is based on dialogue. And so 4 character roles, this is talking about having roles for each aspect of the brain. There's 4 characters. This is referring to Jill Bolte Taylor's work, because I always had I think it's the next chapter. It talks about creating roles for each, or it talks about creating roles, but when I learned about the 4 character model of the brain, it made me realize that I already had these character roles sort of ideated, and then it seems that some fit more with certain aspects of brain processing, or characters, as Jill Bolte Taylor refers to them, than others. So it could be helpful to know, like, we need roles for each character in the brain. So we already have lots of roles in general for character 1, which is more like the ego, our personality. And then character 2 is also like the ego, with more like emotions or the past and protection and trying to protect ourselves. But then we don't have really roles for character 3 and 4 in our brain, which is the right brain. And there are some characters and possibilities in the world already, but they're usually there's few of them. I'll say that. Again, we're not going to get into it too much. So complexity, it's interesting. I put this here because now it's addressing for some of the complexity of, now I've created some projects which were earlier stages, but there's still a lot of complexity left, and how to go with that. And so part of it is learning to communicate difficult memes. So I feel that a lot of the information that has come through me are difficult memes. They're difficult to communicate. They're near impossible to communicate when they come through, hence the writing it down. And then when writing them down, now accumulating thousands upon thousands, like if you have a document with 1,000 lines, how do you even begin to put that in order of a communication, Now that could be something that AI helps with. And then, questions and dialogue. This is the original dialogue with others, and now I put this edit in during my last energetic phase, which was, months ago. Questions and dialogue, and I put with others and AI. So I was thinking that, and that's part of what a big theme of this reorganization of the information is, from a document with different points in different topics mixed in with the research papers or people who shared about their work on YouTube videos or whatever it is, whatever the reference is. Now having those documents separated probably with the same headings, but one is of the insights that came through me, and then the other is the reference of the paper or whatever blurb it is from that I captured, that in order to extrapolate to that. And sometimes what would happen too is, like, say I would watch a YouTube video, I would take a snippet of what somebody said. Here, an example I saw in the document was, I was reading Bo Lotto's book, Deviate. So that's not a YouTube video, but I would take a highlight of the book and capture that. It'd be nice to have a perfect process for that, but it's just in the Pages document, and I would write that in quotes, and then I would write me, and then I would write the part that whatever that was that Bo Lotto said made me think. And it was an extrapolation to my own context. So I'm seeing now that that could actually be an example to feed the AI to say, like, this is sort of how I engage with the facts and research of neuroscientists or these different reductionist paradigms. It's an extrapolation. It's like an insight from what they said. It's not necessarily perfectly about the fact. So if you're seeing what I'm saying here, by having the two documents and the knowledge in the ChatGPT, I might be able to have a dialogue between the things that I wrote and then also the papers that I see relate somehow to it, and then see if the AI sees why I'm connecting those two things, and then be able to have a conversation as myself with new insights, or maybe just the insights in real time, and not have to write anything down anymore. So in a way, I'm trying to create the bibliography of what I've seen could relate, to connect science to the insights that I see. Or in a way, it would be training how a dialogical consciousness that has received insights through dialogical consciousness can speak with science. And I have another process that goes with that, which I don't even know where that is in here, in Re-Uncovery. So I'll find that, because there's sort of, I'm not sure if there's separate like courses or what. So this me talking to myself is for myself. It's also for perhaps one day people who are interested in re-uncovery in general, seeing how it came about, or also seeing that what I'm doing right now is re-uncovery. It's just different information, like what am I engaging with at this point? And then also creating what I'm saying about the different documents, and then also at the same time harvesting out some of the things that go with the character roles. So the harvest of Stage C, I'm looking also for like slam poetry stuff. And it doesn't necessarily, like, I can just be inspired by an insight and turn it into a slam poetry bit. And then also I'm thinking about like movie scripts. I don't know if I'll write a script or like talk with somebody about ideas to write one. And so this would be related to roles, which I already sort of outlined some roles, and I have roles that I play because of other projects I've done. But now if I create a bunch of slam poetry, I'd have a role as a slam poet or a spoken word artist, however it is. And so I have some of that stuff. But since that is more about performing, you know, like the other projects I did, sit down, writing a book, that is challenging. but it's different to actually create something that is to be performed. So whether it's slam poetry that I would perform or somebody else would perform from what I wrote, or movie scripts or short films or something that I write something for it, but somebody else creates it. Those are more like performance or entertainment, like something somebody else is going to observe in a different way. Like somebody can have a book and put it down, but like if you go to an event, like you're stuck there, right? So it has to be really good. And so let's see, where are we on this? So questions and dialogue with AI, having those documents, also planning your altruism, which is part of the roles, and harm reduction, exposure therapy. That's like being outside. And then this is when I get all a little bit like manic, indigenous, talking about eyes. So proof of work. This is funny that I said proof of work process for stage C level projects. Now, I don't remember writing this, but I wrote it before. And this is sort of what I've been looking at like right now as part of it, is that this is proof of work. Proof of work. And I talked about it a bit before, but like, how do you prove that you did this work, right? So say all I do in the next while with the different documents I have is make a course. Now maybe I want to screen record making the course, or at least some part of it, to show that I actually made it. Because does somebody want to pay for something that just like AI put together in 2 seconds? Or do they want to pay for something that a human created? And there could be like pros and cons to both, of course. But one of the things that could be helpful for the proof of work is that if I'm creating something quite novel and based on insights I wrote pre-ChatGPT, then, maybe I want to show how I put that together. So then it's like, okay, these insights were pre-ChatGPT, and yes, ChatGPT's there, but I'm not really using it. I'm just going back to things that I saw before and, figuring out at what level, like maybe the AI that I train, or the chat bot version of my insights, is only of a certain kind that I need in order to communicate with science and to try to speed that up. And then wanting to be able to communicate with those insights, communicating with science, right? So then it's interesting, I wrote like this proof of work into this process. Create your caring trademark. This actually is not my term. So, usually I try my best to indicate. I can't remember who said it, but I'll find it. And, this is the whole thing, like the whole thing about the proof of work is that in the documents that I've written out, I always write the source. And if there's no source, that means that I wrote it. And I realized years ago I needed to start doing that, because I would just write everything down and then not write who said it. So eventually I realized, okay, I don't have to say who said it. I mostly use me and then a colon if I'm like commenting in between the points of somebody's paragraph. So that way I'd make the distinction between what I heard and the insight that I had, or what I read and the insight that I had. So I've done all this work over the years, like pre-ChatGPT and other chat bots or large language models, to make the distinction between like what I said and what others said. And you could say, well, of course you want to do that. But imagine somebody in their mind never thought that they were going to ever write anything. And so everything they just wrote down in one big conglomerate, and then they don't know who said what when they eventually want to go and use the information. So this would actually be something that I would say in stage A documenting, which is chapter 1, is like make sure you mark who said what, if that is relevant, because sometimes we like to write down quotes that we like or whatever. And this may or may not be relevant for people who write a lot or don't write a lot. And for me, I do write a lot. So the playbook, that's a totally different thing. That is actually part of what I want to harvest. So I want to harvest the playbook. So I might actually end up listening to this myself in order to figure out what am I harvesting, because I have different notes written out here, and then I need to figure it out. So the beginning part is sort of talking about this process, and then the next part will be starting to sort things out. And it could be some point where I'm like, I just don't want to do this at all, and that's fine too. I'm just seeing where it's going. But I guess at least getting to a place where there's some kind of stage C template. I'll put template and also courses, because there were some ideas for courses that I had, like short courses on different topics that are pretty important pre-stage C. And, some people might have already learned about it in their life before stage C, but this is a part where it's most important to look at these things. And just with a video that I watched today and yesterday, like there could be some changes in here, right? So finding out what is most relevant for that. Let's see. Pure possibilities player. So I just rewrite this out in many different ways, which is like being really in your body and being able to act as different character roles out in reality. And I've talked about with this myself in many different ways without, here it is, the playbook, the character roles, the body prep. And one of the reasons is like with the advent of these large language models and bots and everything, a lot of the internet content is going to be AI generated. So that might quickly get very boring to us, or it could quickly get too interesting, or it could quickly be dependent on the person, whether it's interesting or not. So if it's too interesting, having a body character will help us to not be too interested in it, like to the point of almost like real addiction, whatever it is that it creates. Phones and social media is already well known to be addictive. So when the AI is in the mix there, like it'll make it possibly worse in some ways. And then they're also saying that the internet could, quote, die because it'll just be so full of bots, like you won't even be able to find a human on there. So then in that way, when you've prepared yourself for that world where it's really boring and we need to go back to other ways of being that maybe feel less evolved, but they're more natural, then we'll be kind of ready. Not only that, like if AI makes everything so entertaining, we may have to be somewhat like really entertaining in order to be interesting to other people. You think about, this is kind of weird, I'm just thinking of it now, how there's, they talk about males who are like incels or whatever, involuntary celibates. Well, that feeling like you're not getting any attention could spill over into all of us, where, they call it, the loneliness epidemic now, but like imagine when the AI entertainment online is so good that we can't even get each other's attention or capture each other's attention, at least for very long. Imagine it's reversed, and instead of, people like picking up their phone every few minutes to look at their phone when they're hanging out with their friends, imagine they're just like looking at their phone the whole time and then only looking at their friends for a few seconds to say something, maybe about at what they're looking at. That already also happens, but I'm just saying, like, it could get really bad. So that's some of the context behind that. And I talked about my book like being a little bit manic all the time, like bringing in some of that creative, playful, spontaneous energy. And that could be something that we need to tap into in the future and in the now. So anyways, I don't want to go into that sort of stuff too much right now, but, first person creator in actuality, regame theory characters. So, first person games in games, now being a first person game in reality, and having roles, and for myself, just having like, say, 20 good friends. Oh, okay, I wrote this in the other day. How to see the eye's DC current is faster than the brain. So that is a key that we'll eventually talk about. So, leverage. And this is interesting because this was in the same document or area that this last one was. And I was just making notes to myself because that's part of it. Of course, there's the insights and everything, but then there's having insights into oneself as these stages go along and as life ticks along. So I love to iterate. So how do I share while iterating? So that's what I'm doing right now. I'm sharing while iterating on what is there, and sharing how I was trying to iterate on it before, and now here I am in the space where I'm going to be iterating on it. So I wrote this before, like months ago, not what I learned, but as I am learning. And this goes to something else that I know I made a note to talk about on somewhere. And it's really like I love educational YouTube content. The thing is, though, is that I think AI is going to take over that. Because imagine it can, and I said this, I think, imagine it can take a scientific study and then make a video like the greatest content creators that make videos on science or make videos on talking about an article online or whatever, right? These sort of curated, and it could make 10 different videos on the same paper in a different way or a different tone or with different bot person or different images or different conclusions or different relevance for, it could create a video for every single type of person out there, like a targeted video, and then attach a product to it that says that it does that thing. Do you know what I mean? So I don't know if and when it'll do that, but I feel like creating content that is obviously human learning, like learning together and learning while doing the video, is going to be cool for some people. It'll be like a niche, right? If people can learn and share in real time, kind of like giving a lecture in a university, like they're live, right? And then of course people have their slides, and then some professors might read off their slides, or some professors might just kind of bounce off whatever, or have the knowledge in their mind. In a way, it's like if a person has studied a topic and it's their project, it's their research, it's their passion, they can kind of stand up there and talk about it. And being able to just stand up there and talk about it could be a thing. So me sharing what I'm learning as I'm learning and iterating is in a way finding what I want to talk about and just sitting here and talking about it and paring down all the messages I've received over the last however many years, nearly 10 years, and figuring out what I want to talk about or what it's saying, or how to just package it all in a way to just leave it behind and feel like I did it some justice. That information, that energy coming through my brain, the actions of writing it down and sort of taking care of it for all this time. And that goes along with communicating difficult memes. Like, what memes do I want to communicate? And the cool thing now with the ChatGPT is if there's something I don't want to communicate, but I want it in a way, in some kind of consciousness, then I could put it into the ChatGPT. So that's why sorting things now could be more interesting. And it's a different, like I said, it's totally different sorting than sorting as if I'm writing a book. And then the other bit for leverage is exploit my exploration. So I read a book a couple years ago called Algorithms to Live By. Very good book. It was the first paperback book that I read in a long, long time. And it talks about explore versus exploit. So when one is in an exploration phase, it's hard to exploit that. So I've been exploring in that. I've had all this information coming to me for years, and now I want to, exploit it. Putting it in a chat to be able to have someone like me out there in the world be able to talk to something that understands somewhat. And like, imagine having all the memes in there as like a dream journal, but not dreams, like an exploration in consciousness. And then a person can talk with that along their journey, and that person understands in different terms, or that being or that entity, whatever it is, understands and is able to reflect back. And it probably can now even with that, but by tweaking it to that, which could be something like, what do they call it? They call it training and refining, I think. So I don't think that's exactly refining like as they do it with the LLMs, but it is refining in a way. Like each person that makes their own chatbot, or whatever you want to call it, version of their own consciousness, they're refining the large language model to represent the information preferentially that that person is interested in or is representative of their consciousness. So let's see what we're at here. So yeah, it looks like I'm going to be separating these insights, maybe, or I'm at least going to start on it and do it while giving voice to some of it, because back when I did self-dialogue years ago, I would have a dialogue with each thing I wrote down, but I kept up on it on a daily basis, so nothing ever accumulated. And then when a lot of it came through as a big long download in 2020, I took that to mean it was a book rather than a dialogue. And so now that I have all this other stuff, I can spontaneously kind of give voice to some of the bits in dialogue as I'm working on it, rather than thinking that I'm going to go through each point bit by bit, right? So that way I give voice to the things that seem to want to have a voice. And then even yesterday or the day before, I was reading through some of them, and I was just like, I was able to unfold what a certain bit meant and the context around it. And I was surprised by that, and that gave me the insight that just sorting it into research papers versus my insights without any form of adding on is likely not enough. And the thing is that by talking about it, I might be able to add it on by voice and then just add the transcript into ChatGPT instead of typing and typing and typing and typing. So that's the thing that could be part of the process. And that's another reason of doing the proof of work, is putting in the transcript into the AI in order to share the work and then share the extra insights that come about when talking about things. So it's a way to extrapolate and expand on things and then worry about just putting in the transcript versus like, now I got to type this out, or now I got to harvest the insights that were extra. And yeah, just saying what I was getting at, and doing a sorting session, harvesting slam poetry and that's feeds into a role, harvesting roles, harvesting movie script stuff, and everybody's stuff that they harvest can be different. These are just mine, which are my examples, which come from the harvest template, which is from stage A, chapter 2. So other people will have different ones. And just like I'm harvesting it from these documents, doesn't mean new insights and possible slam poetry bits don't come up in real time, because they do. And then even if a person doesn't have a repository of writing because they're not a writer, doesn't mean they can't harvest things and start to write them down, or start to categorize or notice different information parts. And it also could be that maybe a performance comes through in real time, and just record yourself doing that for your own personal memory in your phone, and then you work on that and work on making it better, right? So some people already are connected to the performance level, and then maybe making it into a full-length performance. Each time a piece comes through, you can piece them together and work on them, and work on one's embodiment. And then also, I would say that, even though, say, someone's never written things down or captured creativity or information over the years, just hearing like you can do that might start that happening. And also, for example, like years ago, I did a comedy course just for fun. And suddenly, as I was looking around in daily life, I would notice things that are funny, that are in the format of comedy that I was learning. So those bits would come through. So that wouldn't happen before. Of course, like there's regular sense of humor that I have, and everyone's is unique. And then but all of a sudden now I was looking at the world and seeing the comedy as well. So we can see those things or perceive them or hear them, however it works. And just having a way to capture it or save it is helpful for creativity. And of course, I'm talking about all this complex information that comes through me, but it could be different. It could be, I'm hoping that eventually it will pare down into a few different roles and a few different types of information that are coming through. And then the complexity would have informed these different stages to create processes that support other folks in their journey, and also to keep using my own processes myself. But just as my harvest template in chapter 2 was like quite a few different categories, hopefully in this chapter it's just maybe a handful or 2 handfuls of categories. And then, later on it could be less than that, like no longer harvesting slam poetry, or maybe I always do, but we'll see. And also harvesting stuff for a possible course, like the courses I mentioned, and looking at the old insights and expanding them in real time, as well as finding things for the playbook that I'm creating, which is related to the next chapter. It's related to chapter 8. So like using the playbook is chapter 8, but finding the playbook stuff is chapter 7. And let's see. So I have some other sticky notes to talk about here. And let's see. Yeah, so the screen record is kind of for AI. And eventually I'll hopefully create a better screen recording process. More of like a reaction video. And this is the other thing is I remember is this is like reacting to my own content and context, right? So I'm extrapolating it, I'm reacting to it. You know, I might be like, oh, this is silly, or this is like, what was I thinking? Why did I write this down? Or whatever. I'm just saying it's a way to sort of react to it. And the thing that I talked about with Re-Uncovery Stage A and B, and part of the point of this is usually the reaction for somebody with bipolar is not, what we're told is the reaction should be, oh, it's all illness. You know, there's nothing really good about it at all. You know, there's no real conversation of like, what did you create? You know, what did you document? Which isn't even a full creation of some kind. What projects did you start? You know, and apparently a lot of people create a lot of projects and start and don't finish. But the reason in my mind is because a lot of times the energy goes away. The reason there's so much creativity is there's this extra energy, which is unusual that most people don't get. And then because of that extra energy, it requires a rest period. Of course, it's way more complex than that, but the whole point of what I'm trying to say there is there's a discontinuity. So of course, if all of a sudden I don't feel creative, then I'm not going to finish the projects. But luckily, I had a time period of like 4 years where I didn't get derailed, and I created a lot of projects that I finished. And then this last time I was doing a lot and I did not finish. But since I track things and I honor the information that comes through and I honor the projects that I'm creating while I'm creating them, if the energy goes away, I can get back to it. And what I've learned this time and what I was saying to myself is that this is the first time since I created re-uncovery process that I've been in the position where I had a depression and a long period of getting derailed and having no creative energy. And then now that the energy is coming back, like I'm not manic or anything, but I'm creative. It started by me sort of writing things down on paper, and then when I go back to look and I come across and find what I was up to before, it's exactly what I'm seeing now. So there actually is no discontinuity because I honored capturing and documenting and tracking what I was creating, including ideas for what to create next. And so when I start writing down what I want to create next, and then I look at my old couple months ago, what to create next in the process, it's exactly the same, right? And so to me, this shows an alignment, right? So imagine the scenario if I had a psychiatrist and I was like in constant relationship with them for some reason. Imagine I was kind of like hypomanic, then kind of manic, then my heart started racing, I felt a little bit of psychosis, and then I couldn't do anything. And I was kind of manic for months, and the doctor's like, oh, you seem manic or whatever. And then I'm depressed for 3 months, which is what happened. And the doctor's like, you know, oh, see, I told you and all this or whatever. And then I start to feel better. Actually, I think I wanted to do the other scenario. I want to compare the scenario like that, where the doctor's tracking me, and maybe I didn't have a good process for keeping track of things. And then the doctor, after I start to feel better, is like, yeah, see, you don't want to do that again. You don't want to be creative. You don't want to have ideas. You don't want to all these things. And then now imagine the scenario, which is I was creating projects I didn't see the doctor. Then I started feeling depressed for 3 months. Couldn't learn or do anything, any projects, nothing at all. It's like it all disappeared. And then my energy starts to come back, and I look at the projects and I start to say what I want to do next and think about it. And it's exactly where I left off. Now, like how, or the scenario with the doctor is that imagine I had a good relationship where I was able to share my projects, and before I'm like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing the next thing. And then I was depressed for 3 months. And then when I start to feel better, it's like, guess what? I'm doing this, that, and the next thing. But be able to prove that I did it by, like, maybe it's at the point that actually, you know what? Like 6 months later, you know what, doctor? I finished this, that, and the next thing. So it's not that I didn't finish it. It's just, I got derailed. But the extra derailment comes when we self-gaslight ourselves into thinking that it's all garbage. Because from what I've just seen in this instance where I was depressed, and it's my first opportunity to really re-uncover what I was uncovering before I was depressed, then that's exactly what I want to be working on. So it's showing an alignment of myself and maybe, like, you could say my soul, which has nothing to do with time or energy, right? Like we think that we have to be this linear being with never being tripped up, and we know that it's not true as humans. So anyways, that's a little bit of a bumbling about the projects and the possibilities of that, right? So yeah, so having the commentary about all of this will further expand it. And that was the point of writing the book that I wrote, is that I had these insights come through and I wanted to expand upon them. And I didn't put all of them in the book, I just put some. So it was a way of pruning them and then expanding upon some. And I have actually all the documents of all the insights, so I could actually train the AI on all the insights rather than just whatever could go in a book. And it's, in a way, it's like capturing a ledger of insights versus writing a book that is for human audience. So what I'm saying is a lot of this work is actually the AI itself is the audience, right? So how do you prepare or create in a world where the AI is the audience? The AI is consuming what you wrote. And maybe even grading it, maybe even saying how languagey you are. And that's not the only thing that's important in the world. It's going to be less important as the AI takes over that aspect of things. But who knows, right? And I also wonder if the order of the insights, could be more interesting, right? So if I would have had my original, I do have my original 700 pages that I wrote out, I wrote out by hand, that turned into my book. Now, if I put that into AI somehow, that might tell a different story because those are in order. The order that they came through me onto paper. And now I took them and put them into topics for humans, right? And analyzing it in the order it came through, that's like a whole different activity. And AI would probably have to read handwriting because I wouldn't want to type all that up again. But I also did type up quite a few of them that I didn't end up putting in the book. So there's all these there's just a lot of information, right? That can be used to train the AI. And I'll be putting together the documents. Whether or not I actually do train an AI with it, we'll see how that comes about, if that seems to be a thing, right? So I'm going to pause here, and I have more to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it on the next one. And I'm glad that I'm voicing this out because I do think of a few extra things that are helpful, but not too many extra things, which is good. Because if it was just too much overload, then that's not helpful. So thanks for listening, and I'll be listening, and have a nice day.